happening over there. Next, I'd like to introduce James Holton, director of the Tom Albertron and beamline 831. He's going to give us some thoughts on radiation damage.
Yes, thanks everybody. Hi, I'm James Holton. I run beamline 831, and one thing I just realized we should tell you about is this quick excitation scan / fluorescence scan experiment. The beamlines that have vortex detectors can do this. The nice thing about ALS-ENABLE is you don't need to worry about that. Just tell us the science you want to do, and we'll assign you to a beamline that can do this. This is a 10-second experiment that'll tell you all the elements that are in your sample. So if you got some site, could be a zinc, could be a nickel, you're not really sure, this will resolve that. It's very fast. Doesn't even do a lot of radiation damage because the beam is heavily attenuated for these scans. And also, while I'm at it, this is a picture from, you might recognize this from blue ice. At 831, we actually run native blue ice. We co-developed this, collaborate with this with Stanford, and we try to make it as similar to that interface as possible. All GUIs operate more or less the same way, but this, if you're used to Stanford, this would be, or other blue ices around the world, this will be an easy adaptation. And we do support their unattended data collection via the screening tab. And as Jay mentioned, we support a lot of different pins. We don't do those because they're weird, but anything else in this picture we actually can support. There's only one beamline that does this, so you have better luck getting time with standard pucks. But if you're poor and you only have these old kinds of pins, we can still help you out. We can also shoot through trays. This is something that is still under development. I believe you can do this at Diamond, and there's a way you can do it at Stanford now too, which I'm helping out with. But essentially, this is a way of shooting your crystal without ever having to touch it, which can give you useful information. But I also want to tell you about some radiation damage stuff. Now, radiation damage is really important to understand because as all of you are going to be moving from one beamline to another, the relationship between exposure time and damage varies by a factor of 10,000, depending on which source you're using. So you want to know what you're up against. Now, this movie is what happens when you turn off the cryostream after shooting a crystal. The neat thing about it is this little guy over in the corner, that actually survived. That still diffracts after the big crystal explodes. And that's because the beams here at ALS are very well collimated. So the quick thing you need to know about damage is that it fundamentally limits the amount of data you're going to get from any given sample. And it actually doesn't vary much from beamline to beamline. Caveat, of course, for active sites. If you have interesting chemistry going on in your active sites, you need to worry about radiation damage. It unfortunately can't be outrun. There have been many attempts to do this. X-Fells can do it a lot, but they have a different kind of damage. So in general, damage cannot be prevented. The good news is it can be corrected if you collect your data the right way. And it can also be predicted. We've been studying this for 20 years, and we understand how to calculate what the dose is going to be. So this is the QR codes to a paper that describes this. But these are the most common kind of mistake people make when they have especially sensitive crystals is they actually accidentally put in a heavy atom. Iodine being a common one where you, let's say, you put 4 molar sodium iodide, doubles every half molar, so that means your crystals aren't going to live very long. And so this is something really good to bear in mind, sending your crystals to any spectrum. Also, I have a hobby of trying to accumulate records of all the studies that have been done on radiation damage and the dose limits of various types of chemistries. They're not all tabulated, but if you have something similar to one of these, then you can help predict. Again, that QR code will take you to those studies. At this point, you might be wondering, what's this megadray thing? It turns out that's the international standard for dose, which is in joules per kilogram. And we have assembled a document, which is linked to that QR code there, which has listed the flux of every beamline in the world, including the one you're used to using. And it will also tell you how long crystals will live and how long your chemistry will take to transform your active site. We've also distilled this down into a couple of web calculators. This is being slow to update here. There we go. This calculator will tell you how many images you will get from your crystal. There's a pull down on top, which has every beamline in the world and their standard fluxes. And the second calculator, it will tell you whether or not your experiment will succeed because of radiation damage limits. You put in things like what resolution you see on a snapshot and how big your crystals are, and it'll tell you whether or not you need more than one crystal to solve it. Those are useful tools. And we incorporate these technologies into all the data collection software here at ALS. But the critical thing I wanted to tell you about in my last minute is that the number of photons you get from your sample is independent of which beamline you use. You get about 1 million photons per cubic micron under cryo. And that is a fixed number. So all you get to decide is how many images you put those photons on. And when you're making that decision, you kind of want to do as many images as possible to optimize correction for radiation damage. And it turns out that this image and the one that follows, if it ever shows up.
It's showing up on Zoom before the screen.
Yeah, it's showing up here before that. Anyway, so the long exposure era has come to a close. Because it turns out we've done these experiments, and if you collect data really quickly with lots and lots of images with the same number of photons, you actually get the same resolution if you process it with the right software. And this is actually how we solved the CRISPR-Cas13 structure with Jennifer Doudna's group. So this does work, and the optimum you want to shoot for is 1 photon per pixel. And that gives you the maximum capability to correct for radiation damage. And I will close up here. Know your dose, avoid those world records, keep your atoms spinning, and try to keep your atoms light. And who's next?
Thank you, James.